Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
FBI Director Andy McCabe, who authorized an investigation into the president over his ties to Russia, is suing the Justice Department, suggesting he was fired, quote, for his refusal to pledge partisan allegiance to Trump. Among the blistering criticisms of Trump and his allies detailed in the suit, a vivid description of a cast of cronies running the Justice Department and the FBI. From that filing, quote, Sessions, Wray, and others served as Trump's personal enforcers rather than the nation's highest law enforcement officials, catering to Trump's unlawful whims instead of honoring their oaths to uphold the Constitution. Joining this conversation just when we need him, former senior FBI official and MSNBC contributor Chuck Rosenberg. Chuck, I have so many questions for you, but first off, a lawsuit like this, why is it filed and what are the possible outcomes?
Right, so Andy, through his lawyers, filed a civil suit seeking essentially, Nicole, to be reinstated so that he can get his full retirement benefits. It's a civil case in federal district court in the District of Columbia, and I am working my way through all 48 pages.
Let's, Chuck, talk, though, about some of Andy McCabe's treatment by the department he is now suing. He was deputy director of the FBI after Jim Comey, your friend and former boss as well, was fired. There was an open question, not just about whether Donald Trump was obstructing the Russia investigation, but whether by obstructing it, by firing Jim Comey, he was carrying out, either wittingly or unwittingly, the wishes of Moscow. Talk about just how threatened Donald Trump was by Andy McCabe and his leadership of the FBI.
Sure. Well, Andy told that he was the one who authorized opening an investigation on the president's role with respect to the Mueller investigation and Russian interference, and told us that the president was a subject of that investigation. So the president must have felt very threatened by what Andy McCabe did. And by the way, Nicole, what Andy McCabe stood for. And probably a good point to insert my bias. Andy's a friend of mine, and I think he's a man of integrity. But the attacks of the president on Andy were merciless, absolutely extraordinary. And then once Andy was fired, the president publicly celebrated that firing. So what Andy is essentially alleging is that the timetable for his firing was accelerated and his chance to respond to the charges against him were abbreviated.
And Chuck, he was targeted by this president, not just for what you just described, what he represented in his leadership of the FBI, but for his wife's political ambitions. Going back to before Donald Trump was even elected, I believe, he started singling out and targeting Andy McCabe for his wife's career moves. Talk about that.
That's right. So Jill McCabe, Andy's wife, is a physician, a pediatrician, I believe, in Northern Virginia, who decided to run for the Virginia State Senate. And Andy was careful to recuse himself, first to seek ethics advice at the FBI, and to recuse himself from any matters that might be implicated by his wife seeking higher office or elective office in Northern Virginia. He may not have done it exactly right. He may have done it differently were he to do it today, but he sought ethics advice and he tried to play it by the book and tried to get it right. The president seemed very upset by this and alleged that because Jill McCabe received funding for her run for state senate from individuals associated with the Clintons, that this somehow tainted Andy. It's ridiculous.
Chuck, a source close to this filing today says that the complaint is detailed and specific in laying out how the president pressured Sessions and OIG to do the wrong thing. Is that suggesting that the Inspector General's office was somehow tainted and politicized? That seems like a pretty significant development.
Yeah, that's a hard pill for me to swallow. I mean, I've worked with the OIG folks. I know them. Again, they're fallible. They're human. They don't always get it right. But the notion that they would succumb in some way to political pressure strikes me as wrong. That said, just on my brief review of Andy's lawsuit, it does seem that some procedures had been abbreviated and others had been accelerated. And that's troubling, right? I understand that the president was racing a clock. The president had wanted to get Andy fired before Andy turned 50 and before all of his pension benefits vested. So the president was the one racing the clock. And so I think that's an important question for a court to decide, whether Andy didn't get the process that he was due. If that's the case, Nicole, it would be a Fifth Amendment violation, which entitles all of us to due process.
And Rick Stengel, the president's war on justice was, as the word Chuck described it, Chuck uses right, merciless. It was unending. The lawsuit also alleges, quote, it was Trump's unconstitutional plan and scheme to discredit and remove DOJ and FBI employees who were deemed to be his partisan opponents because they were not politically loyal to him. McCabe's termination was a critical element. You don't have to, go and trot out much evidence to prove that. Donald Trump told the New York Times in an interview that he wanted his Roy Cohn. I mean, if you wanted to prove that and you had to put out a witness, I'd pull out the recording of Donald Trump telling you that he wanted his Roy Cohn.
It is Friday, the 9th of August of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. Well, we've made it to the end of the week, which means we have quite a busy weekend ahead of us. It's been that way. Just all sorts of things will be happening over the weekend, and there's no way to predict exactly what it will be. But we know it'll be something, and it may be shattering, earth-shattering, locally shattering. It will keep us awake at night. Okay, when do we rest? Well, there's no rest for the weary, as they say. No rest for the weary. Okay, well, we're still on the outrage, I would call it outrage, over Trump's performance at the hospitals in El Paso and Dayton. So it turns out, there was that little baby that he had a picture taken with. That baby was orphaned. And it was sent home, discharged. I don't know if it was sent home, but it was discharged. And Trump and his people got the baby brought back to the hospital so he could have one of those toothsome smiles of his with a thumbs up. I smell Stephen Miller in all this. Terrorizing the brown people. He hated Mexicans when he went to Santa Monica. The Santa Monica Goebbels moniker for Stephen Miller is very apt. He's carried this racist hatred since he was in high school. He has dreamed of doing exactly what is happening right now. And when I say, since high school, it's not really that long in the big scheme of things. What, 15, 16 years? Not even 20 years. I don't think he's been out of high school. And somehow he got fast-tracked. Boy, I got to tell you, in business and government, if you have a heart full of empathy for your fellow man, sorry, you'll be living on the margins of society. But if you are a hate-filled white supremacist warmonger who wants to incarcerate as many people as you can in icebox baby gulags, And when I say as many people as you can, I mean as many brown people specifically as you can, and then blacks after that. This is the way the guy's hierarchy works. Those people get fast-tracked and somehow are able to make the big bucks on every T-shirt scam there is. All right. Not that I want any of that. But remuneration comes slow, if at all, if you have a heart full of empathy for your fellow American person, human. Jeez. It's anecdotal, but I have done a really good, in-depth, and exhaustive study on this. And generally, that's the case. And those who are able to make some money always have to compromise in some way. Well, of course, life is a compromise. Okay, enough of that. I'm not ruining that I'm not buco rich like, some people are. And all you had to do was just be a clown monster. And they throw money your way. On the other hand, they might send you on vacation early to spend more time with your family, fishing with your son. In some far-off stream somewhere where no one can find you. That's really where he's going. I bet he is. He's fishing. He's fishing around for something. And good riddance as far as I'm concerned. That, like I've said before, he took off the bow tie, but he's still a dapper Nazi. Still. Okay, well, there is much more going on in the world. I mean, hell, the world is going to hell in a handbasket, and for all of our faults, the overbearing, use of firepower and, almost everywhere in the world. You can't really excuse that. But the heart and empathy of the American people is known and loved the world over. The world forgives America's transgressions so much because of we, the people. That's one thing we got going for us. Now, on the other hand, there's a certain potent element of we the people who seem to be very toxic. And they think that their hate, that is highly remunerated, I might add, needs to have more of a soapbox. Because these stupid hippie liberals with their goddamn concern about their fellow man. Oh, God, what a bunch of naive fools. That's what we're called. As I was told by a Trump bro, who happens to be mine, you can't love anything because everything is for sale. Really? I suppose I failed as the bigger brother, the older brother. I failed miserably. I did. My sisters listened, but I was off, in college, university, and then off playing music when the little guy became a big guy. Came back and he was, he made Schwarzenegger look small. What the hell happened? Well, it's in our genetic structure. Anyway, I wasn't there to put him on the right path. So he went to the right. Yeah, what was that Michael J. Fox TV show where, he was like the little Republican in the family of hippies? Yeah. That became familiar. Mm-hmm. What's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy here on this Blue Moon Spirits Fridays? Oh, I forgot to mention, and I shouldn't have to because they're all lined up for you. The French 77s are ready for you. All right. Well, at the top, that was the former FBI official, and we've seen him on MSNBC quite a few times and a few other shows as well. Well, he unpacked the details of Andrew McCabe's lawsuit against the Department of Justice. And Peter Strzok has a lawsuit as well I believe his is more on the civil end. But the civil lawsuits can go a long way. Now, I know that we live in a time where court precedent doesn't mean anything because the Federalist Society has packed the court system, but we're still just a smidgen on the side of a nation of laws rather than a nation of men. And Andrew McCabe being fired because he didn't pledge allegiance to Trump is wholly pledging allegiance to Trump, that is un-American. Yes, it is. On the rest of the menu, the Trump campaign promoted a QAnon conspiracy theory after the FBI called it a threat of domestic terror. Well, did you know that Obama was president when the FBI was, doing things? We have to get rid of the FBI because Obama liked the FBI. This guy's brain is addled by something a little bit more than propecia. Watchdog groups sound the gerrymandering alarm on ALEC's redistricting workshops. Yes, right, ALEC. Legislation in a box. You don't have to know anything about legislating. You don't even have to know anything about gerrymandering. ALEC has it in a box. All you have to open it. All you have to do is open it up, fold it out, and really you just check off the boxes. They do it all for you. And a new Defense Department report found U.S. allies struggle to contain ISIS after Trump declared 100% victory. Well, that's mission accomplished all over again. After the break, we move to the chef's table where Trump accused French President Macron of sending mixed signals to Iran on possible talks. Well, that's a nice way to treat an ally. But we know Trump. Allies are now our enemies, and our avowed enemies are now our friends. And, speaking of friends, Canada's NAFTA renegotiation point man in Washington and a key Trudeau advisor has unexpectedly resigned. What? All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the rightish of the page, right over there by the social media scroll, is our chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln. And we thank Kelly for monitoring the chat room link. Thank you. And then to the leftish of the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will then notice, and all kidding aside, our link to our Patreon site. For over 8 years now, Netroots Radio has been broadcasting 24/7, 365, the hardest working radio station on the internet, I might add. And we would be unable to do this without you, because your generosity has allowed us really to keep the lights on, the modem blinking in its proper protocol, and all the other sundry items like purchasing newish equipment, which we are looking at doing here real soon. Did you know that Flash is not going to be supported on Chrome anymore? And then I find out that this old operating system on one of the PCs, well, all sorts of changes have to be made, and you know what? They make you pay. And we believe in the contract. When you sign the contract, you fulfill the terms of the contract, okay? And the way we are able to do that is because of your generosity, and we thank you so much. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that, and we are forever grateful that he does. I take care of at Justice Putnam. I also post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime. And then I post those links up on for social media in that period of time known in the industry as, what the hell? Well, shit's almost showtime. Well, I'm not even close to being done yet in that period. We usually shorten the name of that to the scramble period. At least we do here at Netroots Radio. If you would like to follow the show on Twitter, you can do so at Cookbook West and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iTunes, iHeart, YouTube. Did I say iTunes already? I probably did. Regardless, you can find it everywhere. Everywhere, except on billboards. I don't know, maybe you could. They have billboards that will broadcast into your car now, in your Bluetooth. So, yes, mixed in with all the very fine podcasts, you'll find our podcasts, and we're down in the W's. Yeah, that's right. I figured they make us work all the time just because we're liberals for a little pay. Let's make it harder for people to find us. Harder? Why would the W be any less equal than the A or the C? All right, well, speaking of weirdness, did you know that a week after the FBI posted that this QAnon domestic, or this QAnon theory that's been floating around is a domestic terror threat, and a week after that, the Trump campaign put out an ad featuring signs that supported the theory. Now, the ad has been taken down. But it's already out there. Feature, not a bug. The Women for Trump ad was released sometime last week and featured multiple Trump supporters holding signs that referred to QAnon. One was a sign that said, Women for Trump, while another said, Keep America Great, with a large Q added to it. While it is true that QAnon believers gather regularly at Trump rallies and can easily be seen among other supporters, the inclusion of two different images focused on Q signs seems hard to excuse as an oversight. The campaign issued no comment about the video or its eventual removal from YouTube. QAnon, an extension of the Pizzagate conspiracy that motivated a gunman to fire shots in a Washington, D.C. pizzeria, is the unfounded belief that Donald Trump and other Washington insiders are secretly working to take down a cabal of Democrats that traffic children across the world. Is fueled not only by anonymous 4chan poster Q, but also by Trump himself through retweets of QAnon accounts on Twitter. Not to mention any number of turns of phrase the conspiracy theorists interpret as validation. A campaign ad that directly cites two Q references is a massive cue to believers that they're onto something, whether inclusion of the signs was intentional or not. The FBI warned that the internet allows conspiracy theories to easily spread to large audiences, which could reach extremist-minded individuals and motivate them to possibly carry out criminal or violent actions as a result. You mean like bin Laden, determined to fly jets into the World Trade Center? They were told, you know. But it's so hard to track it all, isn't it? While the QAnon conspiracy does not overtly espouse violence, it has nevertheless been responsible for inspiring numerous violent acts, including two QAnon believers who have been charged with murder. As the Washington Post's Alyssa Rosenberg noted, QAnon is like a live-action video game. While its tenets are easily dismissed, the zealousness of his adherents cannot so easily be ignored. A guy went to Comet Pizza to save the kids trapped in the basement by Podesta, Hillary, and other devils who were trafficking these poor children in some sick sex cult. You know, these people project so much. The only sick sex cult is Epstein, Trump, and the rest. And a basement at Comet Pizza does not exist. A guy shot up the pizza parlor with the little kids in it having pizza with their parents. Talk about P-tapes. These QAnon people, I hate to tell you. Well, maybe not for you, but these are our neighbors. They think they are onto something. And whatever that something is, has been able to grab a particular specific segment of the body politic. I leave it up to better social scientists to determine how it happened and what it is. But we already know what the results are. You know, I failed to mention that Zach Ford of Think Progress brought us the previous offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and Danielle McLean, also of Think Progress, brings us this offering. The shadowy group responsible for crafting many of the Republican Party's most extreme far-right laws is holding panels on redistricting at its annual conference next week, a sign that the group may be taking part in the GOP's efforts to gerrymander in 2021. The American Legislative Council, otherwise known as ALEC, is hosting 2 workshops during its annual meeting in Austin, Texas, teaching Republican legislators how they should navigate the redistricting process. Lawmakers in a number of GOP-controlled states gerrymandered congressional and legislative district lines at historic proportions the last time the maps were drawn in 2011 because the black guy was president then, and you had to rein in the black guy. They were so fearful. I said, oh my God, we got rid of the 3/5 thing, and now, oh, look what happened. We'll have to punish them. They must be corrected. The 2 closed-door courses called How to Survive Redistricting and What is Redistricting and Why You Must Do It will teach Republican legislators the nuts and bolts of gerrymandering, including the legal aspects, the census process, demographic landscape, and mapping processes, according to ALEC's website. Lawmakers will also learn from veterans of redistricting about methodologies, resources, and strategies to lead a successful redistricting cycle in your state. It's so hard to say redistricting now for me. I don't know why. Republicans have indicated that they fully intend to continue gerrymandering the next time the district lines are drawn in 2021 after the next decennial census. ALEC, meanwhile, is responsible for some of the most extreme right-wing laws in the country, including voter ID laws intended to stop African American and Latinx voters from casting a ballot. Officials at ALEC did not immediately respond to Think Progress's request for comment on the workshops. The reason why Republican lawmakers draw district lines around certain minority neighborhoods, for instance, is so they can give more power to white Republicans. The Trump administration was forced to drop its effort to add a citizenship question to the 2020 census after the Supreme Court determined they needed a new excuse for including it, other than their ostensible rationale to better enforce the Voting Rights Act. The question was expected to undercount at least 9 million people, since many non-citizens and households with non-citizen members would not respond to the questionnaire for fear it would improperly be used by the government to retaliate against them. Of Share Blue Media brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. U.S.-backed forces in Syria and Iraq are facing a difficult struggle against thousands of ISIS fighters, a new report from the Department of Defense reveals. The report, produced by the department's Office of the Inspector General, found that between April and June, the so-called Islamic State consolidated its power in Iraq and mounted a resurgence in Syria. Trump has repeatedly claimed that ISIS and its caliphate have been completely defeated. He reiterated the claim in a July interview with C-SPAN. "We've defeated, as you know, the caliphate in Syria. I did that because I did that. I wanted to do that. 100% of the caliphate," Trump said. When I was at 99%, people said, "Oh, you can't pull out. You can't pull out." Well, when I took it over, it was a mess. Anyway, I defeated 100% of the caliphate. That isn't true, and lives are in danger. The new report's executive summary bears the headline, "Iraqi and U.S.-backed Syrian forces struggle to contain the ISIS insurgency." It notes that ISIS solidified its insurgent capabilities in Iraq and was resurging in Syria this quarter. The U.S. military reported to the Inspector General that ISIS is able to operate as an insurgency in Iraq and Syria, in part because the Iraqi security forces and U.S.-backed Syrian Democratic forces remain unable to sustain long-term operations against ISIS militants. Trump was widely criticized for his erratically executed decision to withdraw U.S. forces from Syria in 2018. It was cited by then Secretary of Secretary of Defense James Mattis when he resigned in December. The Inspector General's report relays the U.S. military's findings that Syrian forces, along with the Iraqis, have been unable to pick up the slack. The Syrian forces have frequently requested American help to confront ISIS's resurgent cells. ISIS militants are using tactics like targeted assassinations, ambushes, suicide bombings, and the burning of crops in the region. ISIS likely retains between 14,000 and 18,000 members in Iraq and Syria, including up to 3,000 foreigners, the report noted. A far cry from Trump's triumphant proclamations of 100% defeat for them. Trump keeps claiming that he presided over a major victory against ISIS. The reality is that his chaotic approach was not informed by information because he gets everything from his gut. And it wasn't from advice from American military leaders because he gets everything from his gut. In this reporter's opinion, I should add, don't put that on Oliver Willis. His decisions have left crucial allies in the Middle East and their citizens vulnerable to ISIS, who continues to mount regular attacks because Trump does everything and makes his decisions from his gut. Not from military advisors, not from actual facts on the ground. And because of that, people will continue to be hurt and killed while Trump continues his hollow victory lap. Okay, let's get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we are going to go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, it was the best of times. Joan Didion wrote that the Manson murders marked the end of the 1960s. The impact of the murders changed the image of hippies from that of free-love peaceniks to something far more sinister. They also changed Hollywood. Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood revisits that bygone era with the fictional Rick Dalton, a washed-up actor relegated to guest appearances on TV dramas, but whose next-door neighbors are the then-hot director Roman Polanski and his new bride Sharon Tate. Rick, played by Leonardo DiCaprio in a sure-to-be-nominated performance, drinks too much and spends most of his time with his stunt double-turned-gopher, Cliff, Brad Pitt, who's been rendered unemployable in the biz thanks to rumors surrounding the death of his wife. In true Tarantino fashion, we get dangling clues but never really learn if Cliff is guilty. For most of the 165-minute piece, we see Rick working and Cliff driving around fantastic sets in a vintage car, listening to Boss Radio from 1969 and doing various jobs for his buddy. While doing this one day, he picks up a hitchhiker who calls herself Pussycat, played by Margaret Qualley, who takes him to Spawn Ranch, a dilapidated former movie set where she lives with her erstwhile family, headed by a guy named Charlie. At this point, the narrative might seem familiar, but you should know better. Once Upon a Time is a movie very much in the style of its famous maker, and mixes performance and humor as easily as it does fact and fiction. Early on, when Cliff accepts a challenge from Bruce Lee, you know that reality here is going to have lots of curves. This one even has Hollywood in its name, so be warned, you'll be lost on Oscar night without seeing it. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. No trip to the beach would be complete without a swarm of hungry gulls. But don't get distracted, because one of those gulls may soon go after your food.
There's a very small proportion of extremely bold individuals that seem to ruin the reputation of the whole species.
Neeltje Bogert, an animal behavior researcher at the University of Exeter. She studied the food-snatching habits of gulls in seaside towns in the southern UK, and she found that very few, only the boldest, would actually take the bait, or make that the bite. The experiment went like this. A researcher crouched near a gull and then set out a plastic bag of French fries. For those brave gulls that then started to approach, the researcher either stared straight at the gull, as in, "I see you, thief," or the researcher simply looked away. And it turns out staring down the gulls made them hesitate 21 seconds on average before approaching the fries. The results are in the journal Biology Letters. And gulls aren't the only ones who behave better when being watched. A 2006 study found that people paid 3 times as much for their drinks at an unattended honor system coffee bar when just an image of staring eyes was displayed nearby. As for the gulls, Bogert points out that we need to learn to live with them, because the particular species she studied, the herring gull, is on the UK's red list of birds of conservation concern.
The thing is, people don't want to have a seaside holiday without gulls there. So it's just finding ways to harmoniously live with one of the only wildlife species we still have around in these coastal areas.
So don't turn your back on the gulls, she says, both figuratively for conserving the species and, of course, literally for conserving your lunch. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
I'm probably okay to have one more drink before I drive home. I'm probably okay. I open the window to stay alert. Probably okay. I just popped some gum in my mouth.
Step out of the car, please.
I probably made a mistake.
Probably okay isn't okay when it comes to drinking and driving. If you see a warning sign, stop and call a cab, a car, or a friend. Buzzed driving is drunk driving. A message brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
What does Donald Trump mean by a safe third country? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. Migrants from Honduras and El Salvador who survived the perilous land journey to the United States' southern border have gone through Guatemala. Trump insists that those migrants must be denied the right even to seek asylum in the United States unless they have filed for asylum first in Guatemala. The problem? To be returned to a third country, not the country the person came from, not the country they're seeking to migrate to, the United States. There needs to be a, quote, safe third country, end quote, agreement between the United States and that country. And the United States and Guatemala don't have such an agreement. Trump says, well, yes, he does. But the highest court in Guatemala says, no, he doesn't, because the Guatemalan Congress hasn't approved such an agreement, nor have virtually any other countries for that matter. And Guatemala isn't remotely capable of even considering these applications. And critically, Guatemala is not remotely safe for these migrants because the reach of the gangs and the violence they are fleeing is long. Indeed, the United States State Department says that violent crimes such as murder and armed robbery and extortion, other violent crimes and gang violence is rampant in Guatemala. Trump has designated Guatemala as a safe third country. It's not. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1927. That was the day the California School Employees Association was founded. Today, the union includes more than 215,000 members. But it all started with just 9 men and 1 woman. This group of determined Oakland custodians wanted to improve their voice on the job. They had come together to support an elderly custodian who could not afford to retire because public school employees did not have a pension plan. They met for 3 days to develop the framework of their union. Their first priority was to establish retirement benefits for custodians. Just 1 year after the union was founded, they met their first goal. They helped to push a bill through the California legislature that provided retirement for all school employees, not just teachers. Within 10 years, the union had grown to 10,000 members. They continued to work through the legislative process to win a 40-hour work week, sick leave, and protections against age discrimination. For decades, the union has stood on the front lines against the drastic public education budget cuts. During the 1980s, the union pushed for the cleanup of asbestos in California schools. They knew this was important for the health and safety of both the union members and the students they served. Since then, the California School Employees Association has continued to fight for safe schools and fair working conditions. In 2001, they affiliated with the AFL-CIO. Today, the union represents members who perform security work, food service, office and clerical work, maintenance, transportation, and library services. In short, without these essential workers, there would be no public education. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
I read the news
news today? Oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
At least we're talking about guns now, so there's that. Nancy Pelosi on Thursday sent the president a letter asking him to use his powers in Article 2, Section 3 of the Constitution to bring the Senate back to consider House-passed bipartisan gun violence prevention legislation. Although she wants the Senate back, Pelosi is showing no signs of bringing her chamber back into session in the foreseeable future, believing the onus is on Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. McConnell, meanwhile, appearing on radio in Louisville, said that he would not call his chamber back into session, but did say that background checks would be, quote, front and center in the gun debate when Congress returns. Yeah, we'll see. Pelosi and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer released a statement late Thursday saying that they both spoke to the president and that he said he'd review the bipartisan House-passed legislation, H.R. 8. That bill creates a background check system for gun transfers. Meanwhile, the threat of gun violence remains a way of life in America. The city of Houston is on alert after a gunman killed 2 people on a freeway during Thursday's evening rush. The shooter is still at large. Police say they don't have a motive for the attack, but noted they found drugs in the attacker's vehicle. And then there's Springfield, Missouri, where a 20-year-old man on Thursday wearing body armor and military fatigues entered a Walmart armed with a long gun, a handgun, and more than 100 rounds of ammunition. He was arrested after causing a panic. You think? Trump is reportedly mulling legislative and executive responses to the violence, which may include expanded background checks, but has also reportedly been warned by the NRA's Wayne LaPierre not to go there. Stay tuned. Meanwhile, in impeachment news, House Judiciary Chairman Jerry Nadler admitted in a few interviews on Thursday that an impeachment inquiry is actually already underway.
A lot of Democrats, they don't want to be forced to vote for an impeachment inquiry, but they presumably would be willing to vote for impeachment itself if you presented them with the evidence.
There's no such thing. The committee has initiated an investigation into the question into the various malfeasances.
So in your mind, you're saying this is exactly the same as what we all call formal impeachment proceedings by another name?
This is formal impeachment proceedings. We are investigating all the evidence. We're gathering the evidence. And we will, at the conclusion of this, hopefully by the end of the year, vote articles of impeachment to the House floor, or we won't. That's a decision that we'll have to make. But that's exactly the process we're in right now.
Former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe is suing the Justice Department and the FBI over his termination from the agency last year, arguing that his firing was politically motivated by Donald Trump.
This is a lengthy and scathing federal lawsuit from Andrew McCabe. In it, he asks D.C. federal court to determine that his termination was unlawful, to reinstate him as deputy director of the FBI, and also in turn to then reinstate his early retirement benefits and full pension. But Brooke, really in this lawsuit, this is a direct attack on the president. And this was something that was previewed by Andrew McCabe in that 60 Minutes interview that happened just a few months ago, when he really put it this way. He said, "I was fired because I opened an investigation against the president of the United States." And he doesn't hold back in this lawsuit. In fact, in the opening paragraph of this lawsuit, Andrew McCabe puts it this way. He says that he believes the United States government remains a government of laws and not of men, and that he has brought this case to remedy the defendant's unlawful retaliation for his refusal to pledge allegiance to a single man. That single man that he later goes on to talk about, of course, being the president. Andrew McCabe has brought this lawsuit against the Attorney General Bill Barr, the Department of Justice, as well as the director of the FBI, Chris Wray, and the FBI itself. But really, it seems to be that his main target here is the president. For the first few pages of this lawsuit, he talks about the president's unconstitutional scheme, as he puts it, to target members of the FBI, agents, officials who didn't agree with the president.
Donald Trump on Thursday tweeted that he'll appoint Joseph McGuire, the director of the National Counterterrorism Center, as the acting director of national intelligence after Dan Coats steps down next week. At the same time, he announced that Sue Gordon, currently the number 2 intelligence official, who by law would take over temporarily as acting director, would instead leave with Coats on August 15th. Apparently, several Trump allies outside the White House had urged Trump to remove Gordon, a career intelligence officer, describing her as too close to former CIA Director John Brennan. Brennan, of course, has publicly criticized Trump's leadership, and the president in turn has called him the worst CIA director in our country's history. And so it goes. And in case you were wondering, the taxpayers have already paid out more than $106 million to Donald Trump's own properties for his golf outings as president. And now he's off for another 10-day vacation at his golf club in Bedminster, New Jersey, all at taxpayer expense.
I got good news.
And that's just a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports, I hope you'll check out The Nicole Sandler Show. Get the podcast anytime at NicoleSandler.com or listen Tuesday through Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 Pacific, right here on the Progressive Voices Network.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 65 degrees Fahrenheit, only expected to go to a high of around 80 degrees today because we will have cloudy conditions. Most of the day, winds will be light and variable, and we are having an increasing chance of rain due to thunderstorms, which may cause fires, and we hope there's enough rain to put out any potential conflagrations that may occur because of intense electrical activity expected tonight and tomorrow. Looks like, just about a third of an inch tonight and a quarter of an inch tonight and a quarter inch tomorrow of rain expected from these thunderstorms. So we do hope that that puts it out. We are in a red flag warning, which means that we are in a high intense fire danger due to electrical storms. Grass pollen is moderate though, and the air quality index is inched up a tad, but still in the good range at 19 parts per million, and the daytime UV index remains very high at 8. Barometric pressure is rising at 29.74 inches. Visibility is at 10 miles. And relative humidity is at 83%. Ooh, sticky. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchase. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 75 and mostly cloudy. Paris is 73 with a rain shower and a flood warning. Rome is 93 and sunny with a heat advisory. Kiev is 78 Fahrenheit with squalls of wind. Kabul is 86 and fair. Hong Kong is 85 and clear. Tokyo is 83 and mostly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 50 degrees, clear with wind. San Francisco, California is 60 degrees, cloudy with a wind advisory. And New York, New York is 78 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. anonymous worker bees at Reuters, and why wouldn't they be anonymous knowing how Trump has such a thin skin, knowing that this has been reported? Trump said yesterday, Thursday, no one is authorized to speak to Iran on behalf of the United States, and he accused French President Emmanuel Macron of sending mixed signals to Tehran over possible talks. I know Emmanuel means well, we as do all the others, but nobody speaks for the U.S. but the U.S. itself, Trump said in a series of tweets. It was not immediately clear what Trump was referring to, and the White House declined to comment. But a report earlier this week said Macron had invited Iranian President Hassan Rouhani to this month's G7 summit to meet Trump. A French diplomat denied the report yesterday because Trump has such a thin skin. European leaders are seeking to defuse the brewing confrontation between Tehran and Washington after Trump pulled out of the Iran nuclear last year and renewed sanctions in an effort to push a new deal under the U.S. Republican president. Tehran has responded with a series of moves, including seizing a British tanker in the Gulf and retreating from some of its commitments to limit its nuclear activity made under the deal. The crisis is expected to be a focus at the G7 summit later this month. Trump and his administration officials have previously said Trump is open to talks with Iran and that the United States does not want war with Iran. Of course, we all know John Bolton does. And I don't know, is he rattling sabers with Iran or is he too busy with North Korea?
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Kelsey Johnson of Reuters brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau unexpectedly announced yesterday, Thursday, that Canadian ambassador to the U.S., who played a pivotal role in the renegotiation of NAFTA, will leave Washington at the end of August. David McNaughton became ambassador in March of 2016 due to his importance in trade negotiations with Canada's closest neighbor and biggest partner. He had cabinet-level status in Ottawa. McNaughton was also an advisor in Trudeau's 2015 campaign. In a letter, McNaughton said his decision to leave was not taken quickly or lightly, and that he had long planned to complete my work before Canada's national election on October 21st, particularly after the U.S. lifted its tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum products earlier this year. McNaughton told reporters at a news conference in Washington that he was looking forward to spending more time with his family, don't they all? Canada's deputy U.S. ambassador Kirsten Hillman will become acting ambassador following McNaughton's departure, Trudeau said. Foreign Minister Chrystia Freeland, who worked closely with McNaughton during the NAFTA talks, praised him for his steady hand, inside intelligence, and grit as a negotiator. On Thursday, McNaughton warned his departure should not be seen as a premature victory lap and said the agreement still faces considerable challenges, such as the need for passage by the U.S. Congress, meaning it's going to the death chamber in the Senate. Well, he's getting out when the getting's good. All right, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day and for the week, but you do know that Netroots Radio is going to broadcast on. In fact, we're going to meet up on Monday for River City Hash Mondays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day, all night, and all weekend for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here on Monday, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.